Yeah. Great. So I guess here we are. We are online.
Well, you can let everybody in and get rid of the waiting room.
Yeah, we're just waiting a couple of minutes so everybody in the Zoom room can join us. Great. So I think we can start. So here we are also live streaming. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the 24-hour Peace Wave. It's so incredible to see so many people here with us, and we are so excited to open this space. And yeah, we will serve around the world on a wave of peace. We will start from the Atlantic Ocean, and we will go all the way around until the Mediterranean Sea. And my name is Emily Molinari. I'm part of the International Peace Bureau, which together with our partner War Beyond War is the organizer and the host of this event. And before we start with the first part, I would like to hand over to David Swanson, Executive Director of War Beyond War, and Sean Connor, the Executive Director of the International Peace Bureau, for a brief introduction. So David, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to Emily and to dozens of people who have been tremendous help in putting this together. This is a second annual event, hopefully more to come in the years ahead, but hopefully never more needed than right now in terms of opposition to NATO's agenda. NATO is about to meet with and take steps that its own leaders have within the past year said would lead to World War III. We need this more than ever. Thanks for being here. Look forward to the next 24 hours. Sean Connor, welcome.
Hello, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Sean Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the International Peace Bureau. The 24-hour Peace Wave, this is our second year doing it. It's really quite an exciting event because not only does it go for 24 hours straight, it goes around the entire globe and covers peace activists from every continent and every corner of the world to share perspectives, opinions, and the work that they're doing. And more than that, quite importantly, it shows that we're all in this together, that our peace movements are not regional, national, but indeed international, and that there are so many connections to all of the work that we're doing, and that there is a loud and important voice for peace from all around the world that can gather together and make a difference. While, of course, this 24-hour Peace Wave is planned around the NATO summit, and that is one of the big focuses that we'll be talking about throughout many of the segments of this, it is more widely just about what really peace means to our movements from around the world and how we can achieve that against, of course, military alliances, but also showing really the strength of what we can do all together to create a more peaceful world, and showing all of the different components that bring that together. Just to quickly say for everyone who's joining us, some quick tech considerations as well. Please keep yourself muted unless you are speaking in one of the segments so that we don't have interruptions. We do have the chat open as well, and we encourage you to communicate through the chat throughout our entire call today. So we're very happy to have you on and doing that, but please keep yourself muted so that we don't have those interruptions. And thank you all again for joining us. We're very, very excited for what will happen over this next 24-hour period here. So without any further ado, I'll turn the floor back to Emily Molinari, our coordinator here at the International Peace Bureau, to start off our first segment here.
Great, thank you both. And yeah, we can start with the first part of this incredible Peace Wave. We are going to hear contribution from Ireland, UK, Portugal, and Western Africa. we want to say a very big thanks to the regional coordinators of this part, which are Podrick McCarrick from CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, Shadia Edwards Dashti from Stop the War Coalition, Ernest Gibson from Global Peace Association of Ghana, and Rashid Yusuf from Ra Foundation. Thank you very much to all the regional coordinators that had helped us during this event. And now we can start officially with our first speaker, Roger Cole. He is the chair of Peace and Neutrality Alliance PANA in Ireland, which was founded in 1996 to advocate and defend Irish neutrality. Roger, thank you so much for being with us here today. And yeah, the floor is yours. Sorry, I think you are still muted, Roger.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great, thank you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a tremendous opportunity for us to give you a brief idea of what's happening in Ireland. PANA itself was founded in 1996. As you say, it's a campaign on every referendum. One of the big differences between Ireland and other countries in the European Union is our constitution said sovereign power lies with the Irish people. So a man called Raymond Crotty brought a case, said you can't have a referendum regarding the European Union without a referendum, and the Supreme Court agreed. But we're completely unique in that regard. So we have actually campaigned actively against a number of European Union treaties that have steadily processed the capacity of the European Union to steadily become more and more militarized. We won the Nice referendum, the first Nice referendum. And one of the major achievements we had was a no vote for the treaty. So in response to that, because the establishment knew that the commitment to Irish neutrality is very strong among the Irish people, the triple lock. What the triple lock is legislation which says that no Irish troops can serve abroad without the agreement of Dáil Éireann, the Irish government and the United Nations, because we have a very strong, most small states, and we're no different, see the core need for a global organization. As we all know, great powers go to war anytime they want, whether it's Russia or the United States of America. If they go to war, that's what they do. And I think much of the European Union is to try and transform the European Union into another superstate. So we've got that, we won that. So now that particular issue is under attack again by the government. This is a pamphlet we've produced, which argues that essentially this triple lock that was won in 1990, thereabouts, is again under attack by the current government. Luckily for us, however, we have a very good president in our Michael D. Higgins, and he played a key role in opposing the Irish government, and essentially the uproar, the anger was so strong that they had to back down and admit that they would not now be applying currently for membership of NATO. That's what we're about most at the moment. Ed Horgan is on the line as well, I believe, and he plays a key role in talking about the use of Shannon Airport by the Americans in their perpetual war. I mean, they did thousands and thousands of US troops have passed through Shannon Airport. But most of the hard work in campaigning against that goes over to Ed Horgan. So if you want to know Ed Horgan on for a while, a few minutes, that would be fine by me. Can you hear me? Can Ed hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
No, can you hear Ed? Can you? I'm just asking, can Ed hear me? Ed Horgan, I'm sure I thought he went on there a few minutes ago. I was trying to give him a chance to speak, but I mean, I have no problem speaking a bit longer.
Yeah, we can try to reach out to him.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, now we can, and maybe if he wants, he can unmute himself now. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Just to agree with everything Roger has said, but also at the moment with the war in Ukraine, which is highly illegal and counterproductive, even from a Russian point of view. In the last 48 hours, we have just heard that the United States has agreed to provide cluster bombs for the Ukrainian military, and also it probably has already provided depleted uranium munitions. Clearly, these should be banned and have been banned by over 100 countries. And the damage that this will do, not only to the soldiers involved, many of whom are conscripts on both sides, but also huge numbers of civilians will be killed by these cluster bombs and depleted uranium. And the killing will go on for decades, as has been happening in places like Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, in Vietnam and other places. So it's hugely important that organizations like the World Peace Bureau and World Beyond War do all we can at all times to bring peace to Ukraine and to stop the dreadful killing. Thank you very much.
And just one small point on that. PANA commissioned a survey by Ipsos, which is a major polling company. And it showed that 87% of Irish people wanted a ceasefire negotiations and 5% did not. So, and that's exactly our position on the war and seeking a ceasefire negotiations between the Ukraine and Russia. So we came out that position at the start of the war. But this shows, the evidence shows that we are actually reflecting the views of the vast majority of the Irish people. Any questions?
Yeah, we can open also the floor to questions if participants want to share them into our chat, so then we can read them out loud. And in the meantime, maybe we can start with Sean. Yeah.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for a wonderful introduction there, and for the additional comments as well. Maybe just as a starting question, while we're talking a little bit about Ireland and the work going on there, I'm not the most familiar with the Irish case, but I have heard as well, I think we talked even in the last 24-hour Peace Wave, about an air base or airports in Ireland that the U.S. has permission to use. I'm wondering if I'm remembering correctly here, or if you have any information, or you could shed a little light on that and any work that PANA might be doing around that.
Well, Ed Horgan is the chair and leader of Shannon Watch, which are affiliated to PANA, and they focus on that. So over to Ed.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Shannon Airport is an international airport in the west of Ireland. It has been used illegally to allow US military troops to Shannon Airport for the last 3 decades, but particularly since the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. 3 million armed US troops have passed through Shannon Airport over the last 21 years. This is in clear breach of international laws and neutrality. Ireland doesn't have to be a neutral country, but our government are constantly saying we are a neutral country. Therefore, we are bound by international laws like the Hague Convention on Neutrality. My main concern, and I think everybody's concern in Ireland, is that we are participating in the killing of innocent people in the Middle East. In recent times, we have discovered that a senior Irish Army officer in an interview with a book on neutrality was boasting that he helped to kill Taliban when he was serving with the NATO force in Afghanistan. Clearly, from many people's point of view, the Taliban might not be a very nice organization, but to a very large extent, they see themselves as being freedom fighters trying to get rid of foreign occupation of their country. But the killing of innocent people in the Middle East is one of our main concerns. Up to 1 million children have died across the wider Middle East since the first Gulf War, from in Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen especially. So the killing of innocent people, especially children and innocent civilians, is why I am involved with peace groups in Ireland like PANA, but also with World Beyond War, because we must cooperate internationally in order to bring international peace. So thank you very much so far.
Thank you so much, Edward. I see we have another question in this chat, and maybe it's a good follow-up directly on that, which is for our colleagues in the US. They're wondering what would be the best way in the US to protest the illegal use of the Shannon Airport. And then there are a few other comments here as well, but I think so far that's the only question I see. So I'll let you follow up on that one if you have some ideas or thoughts there.
Yeah, I think one way of the people in the US could get onto their members of Congress and senators and ask them to respect Irish neutrality and to persuade the US administration not to use Shannon Airport. The US military does not need to use Shannon Airport. All the planes they are using to bring troops into Europe and the Middle East are now big enough to be able to overfly Shannon Airport. One of the reasons they're using Shannon Airport is to try and destroy Irish neutrality, as they succeeded in doing in recent times with both Finland and Sweden. Neutrality, both in Ireland and internationally, is a very important way of promoting international peace.
Yeah, I just make a few remarks on that. There have been surveys done to show that somewhere between 60 and 70% of the Irish people support neutrality. But of course, there's virtually no coverage of the fact that Shannon Airport is being used by the mainstream media. And I suspect quite a lot of people don't even know that Ireland is not actually neutral. It's actually a US aircraft carrier. So there are core problems on that, but at least the indication that we're not going to be joining NATO anytime soon. But it's clear that they're integrating us into organizations that are extensions of NATO itself. So it's all a kind of a game where Irish neutrality is being destroyed, and pretend we're still neutral. It's something they have to do to have the support of the Irish people. But it is, in fact, a pack of lies.
We do have a monthly peace protest at Shannon Airport. As it happens, the next one is tomorrow. We have been doing this for many years. Also, peace protesters have gone into Shannon Airport, including myself, on several occasions to try and search US military aircraft. And at least 38 peace activists have been prosecuted for peace actions at Shannon Airport. Some have been imprisoned. Clearly, nobody has been prosecuted for helping to kill innocent people in the Middle East. Ireland has also been complicit in the torture of prisoners in Guantanamo and elsewhere, because Shannon Airport was also used significantly to support the CIA Extraordinary Rendition Project. Clearly, the issue of torture is also quite an important issue. But all the wrong people are being prosecuted. As I mentioned, at least 38 peace activists had been prosecuted, including Margaret Darcy, who served a number of months in prison. But our protests are ongoing. Next one tomorrow. So if you're ever passing through Shannon Airport, make contact and try and encourage your members of Congress and senators to persuade the US government to stop using Shannon Airport for wars in the Middle East and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We're running down to our just the last couple minutes, and I see we have a few more questions, so I'll quickly pose those to you and then give you a couple minutes just for some final responses or final thoughts that you have. So one question from Kathy Kelly is, what is the significance of Ireland having signed the TPNW, or the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? Another is sort of a follow-up in terms of the US role of what particular legislators in the US, if you have anyone in particular in mind who might need a little stronger of a push from civil society. And then I see also the question from Adrian here, why is the Irish government not protecting their status of neutrality? And how do global world people accept, coming from Miriam at the end. So a lot of questions and unfortunately very little time, but maybe just quick answers or thoughts from you, just 2 or 3 minutes here. Thank you.
Well, I'll just answer the first question. Ed can handle the others. And the reason why they don't protect Irish neutrality is the current Irish government is committed to destroying it. That's what they want to do. Any shred of evidence left in Irish neutrality is to be terminated. And they're strongly supporting the steady creation of a European army.
And yes, Ireland has signed up to various international treaties, and we are bound by conventions like the Convention Against Torture and the Hague Convention on Neutrality, but our government chooses to ignore these on a regular basis. I suspect that there may even be threats and possibly even bribery involved. It's suspected, in fact, that the US administration in 2003 under George W. Bush may well have put economic pressure on our Prime Minister to allow US military to use Shannon Airport. It's difficult to prove if this is the case, but it's likely to be one of the reasons. But clearly, our main priority is to stop Irish complicity in war crimes being committed elsewhere. And clearly, we are equally opposed to what Russia is doing in Ukraine. The only difference is Russia is not using Shannon Airport or abusing Irish neutrality. If it was, we would be equally opposing what's going on at the moment. So much to be done, and thank you all in World Beyond War and the Peace Bureau for all you're doing.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you both so much for your contributions. And I think Emily will take over now for the next contributions here.
Exactly. Yeah. Also from my side, thank you very much, Roger and Edward, for your speeches here. And
You're very
now
welcome.
thank you. Now we need to move on. We have another country. Now we are going to hear some contribution from the United Kingdom. We will first watch video where Shadia Edwards-Dashti is going to interviewed Kate Hudson, Sophie Bolt, Chris Neiman, and Lindsay German. And the topics here are going to be Britain's nuclear weapons, the return of US nuclear weapons to Lakeheath, Britain's role in the war in Ukraine, and the need for a peaceful settlement to the war. So we can now play the video. Great.
Sophie Bolt. I'm Vice Chair of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and I'm really delighted to be part of this peace wave here today.
My name's Chris Nynham. I'm the Vice Chair of the Stop the War Coalition. Very pleased to be involved in the peace wave today, a few days before the start of what sounds like it's going to be a very threatening NATO summit.
My name's Lindsay German. I'm the convener of the Stop the War Coalition in Britain. I'm very happy to be participating in this peace wave this weekend because I think we've got to say no to NATO and stand up to what NATO is doing.
I'm Kate Hudson. I'm General Secretary of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. I'm really pleased to be part of the global peace wave.
Well, C&D, we feel that we're in a really a serious situation here in terms of the nuclear escalation. We've had, Russia repeatedly saying that it could use its nuclear weapons if it feels threatened. It's now going to be stationing nuclear weapons in Belarus. And meanwhile, since 2015 and beyond, the US has been strengthening its nuclear presence in Europe. It's been expanding its NATO bases so that they can take new nuclear weapons. It's been developing a new fighter jet, the F-35A, which can take and launch new nuclear weapons. It's an incredibly dangerous time.
And we're seeing nuclear weapons even coming here to the United Kingdom.
Yep, we are expecting these new nuclear weapons to be sited in Lakenheath.
What is the alternative, particularly for us as activists?
Well, this is where the population come in. Across Europe, we know that there's been huge protests against NATO involvement and expansion and escalation. And here in Britain, why are we protesting? We know that our government is probably the most hawkish US ally in NATO. It blocked peace talks in Ukraine. It has been pushing for military escalation. It's Britain that's going to be sending depleted uranium shells, radioactive depleted uranium shells to Ukraine. It's Britain that's all the time banging the drum. It's Britain that's spending way more than other NATO countries, apart from the US, on military defence. So for us, the British peace movement here in Britain, it's really, really important that we make our voice heard. And so being part of this coalition, this coordinated action against NATO that's global, it's so inspiring, but it's also so necessary for us to be part of that.
Well, the key message for me is that NATO is not a force for peace, but is a force for war, and we have to stop this war. We've got the war going on in Ukraine, but of course there's a big backstory to this, and the backstory is that NATO has been expanding since the end of the Cold War in all sorts of ways. It's now expanded into a record number of countries across Europe, including in Eastern Europe, including some countries which were part of the former Soviet Union. It wanted Ukraine and Georgia to be members of NATO, and there's still talk about Ukraine joining NATO. And we know that NATO is putting huge amounts of weapons and training into Ukraine. Now, the situation is such that the war is at a very dangerous phase. There are many, many people suffering on both sides of the conflict. I'm very much against the Russian invasion in the first place, but the truth is that the only way to stop this war now is peace negotiations, and NATO is very much opposed to this. So I fear that the NATO summit this week will be about escalating war, will be about more militarism, more military being brought into the Ukraine battlefield. But of course, we're talking not just about war on one front, we're talking about war on another front. And in particular, now if you talk about the Indo-Pacific area, you're talking about NATO expanding there, the AUKUS Pact, all these different kind of things, a whole number of treaties and alliances in the Pacific which are surrounding China. So these are very, very dangerous times, and NATO is contributing to this danger. Our government has played an unprecedented role here. It is actually the most warmongering of the NATO powers, is actively encouraging more armaments, more dangerous armaments, has been involved in sending cruise missiles to Ukraine, and is playing a very, very bad role. We've had this with Boris Johnson, who quite deliberately in 2022 scuppered peace talks over Ukraine, which were being developed in Istanbul. He since then has been fighting more and more to get more troops and to get more equipment to Ukraine. But of course he's been followed by Liz Truss and then Rishi Sunak, who have exactly the same approach to it. And they're talking all the time about how we escalate the war, how much more money is going to be spent on the war, all of these different sorts of things. So it's in the West and around the world who are saying no to NATO, no to war, let's have peace talks now.
Today is obviously a really big day, the day of action internationally to stand up against what's happening. How important is that for us as activists?
It's extremely important because, of course, always for activists, you feel very often you're in a minority. It's very hard sometimes to get your message across. And, of course, we have the media in this country that is not helping. We have the politicians that are united in supporting the war. And in this situation, it's extremely important that we know there are people across the world. We know there are people in Africa, we know there are people in Latin America, we know there are people across Europe and the United States who are all standing together and saying, peace talks now, no to war.
We opposed the Russian invasion from the start. The level of escalation, the amount of arms that have been pumped into the region and into the country by the West has turned it into a proxy war between the NATO powers led by the US on the one hand and Russia on the other. And unfortunately, the first victims of it are the Ukrainian people. That's the truth. But also, to make matters worse, it risks a confrontation on a much wider scale, including the possibility, for the first time really since the Second World War, the serious possibility of an on-land war between two nuclear-armed states, which could obviously trigger something much more horrendous and much more dangerous.
So what should we be doing? What is the alternative? What's the answer?
Well, obviously we're part of the peace movement and we're involved in protesting and campaigning and demonstrating against the war, both in Britain and kind of through connections internationally. And there's the beginnings of a big peace movement developing in Europe with connections in the rest of the world. And that's very, very important. And what we're calling for is first and foremost negotiations, diplomacy, a ceasefire and talks. I think there are voices within the corridors of power in the US who are now beginning to say we need to think about a bit of an endgame here. I don't think they're very loud at the moment, but I think that through the summer and perhaps into the autumn they may come to the fore more. Whether or not they do will partly be dependent on whether there's a kind of surge of popular opposition and resistance to the war. And that's why the anti-war movement is so important, particularly now strategically.
Obviously, we're speaking just a few days before the NATO summit kicks off. Today is the International Day of Action. Why is that so important?
Well, because it's part of building the resistance. I mean, one of the things that really marks this situation is this kind of suffocating consensus in the mainstream, in the media, in politics, in academia, where everyone's saying, in the official world, everyone's saying, you know, this is an absolutely crucial war. We've got to topple Putin. You know, we've got to weaken him. That's the aim of, that should be the aim of what we're doing. There's very, very few, almost no voices in Britain in the mainstream talking about peace, talking about diplomacy, talking about an end to the killing. So there's a great responsibility on the movement to kind of reach out and to try and build networks and build support. And actually, when you get out on the streets, there's no war fever in Britain. There's no great enthusiasm. In fact, there's a huge majority against actual British troops being sent to Ukraine, even though they have been, as it happens. So there's a lot of opposition to war in you know, amongst ordinary people. Our job in the anti-war movement, and that's one of the things we're doing today, is to get out on the streets, to talk to people, to petition, to leaflet, to put the argument, so that we can build networks that can then mobilise further down the road.
It's like the British government is the most gung-ho of all the countries across Europe, even sometimes more gung-ho for the war than the United States. And in the peace movement, we have to be out there on the streets, making the case for alternatives. We have to be lobbying our MPs and lobbying government. And above all, I believe, we have to be establishing the links across Europe for the peace movement and globally as well, because the global south and their position against the war, you know, against war fighting and, you know, not siding with NATO. That's really important as well to shift the dynamics. So one of the reasons why the kind of anti-NATO actions coming up this weekend and coming up next week, they're really important, and working together, even on the global peace wave, that's bringing the movements closer together.
One of the things that I really wanted to ask you as you were speaking just then is the question why? Why is the British government so gung-ho, so adamant for war, war and more war? Why?
Well, I think it's policy for quite a long time, decades in fact, has been to be like, well, we used to, in the Iraq War, we used to call it the poodle for the United States. The United States, since the end of the Cold War, has had a really strong position. It identified itself at that time as the only remaining superpower. It decided it was going to fight to maintain itself in that position. And the whole of global politics since then has been shaped by that US determination. And Britain has been there, following on, working with the United States, occasionally from time to time picking up, money and contracts and stuff in the wake of war, particularly in the war in Iraq. We saw earlier this year how Rishi Sunak in his budget was saying, actually, we've already got loads of money going on the military, we're going to give an extra 5 billion. 3 billion of that was actually for the nuclear stuff, so this is really escalatory money that should be going, say, to the nurses, teachers and so on, all being spent on dealing with the problem of climate change. That is actually going on the military, so that is a part of the cost. But the other cost, like you've said, is about the human cost, for the people of Ukraine themselves. And one of the things that struck me as so terrible recently, Shadia, was the announcement that our government, since also the US government, sending depleted uranium munitions, alongside the tanks they've already sent. We know, it's well known, that depleted uranium munitions, they're radioactive, they have a lot of very bad properties, and people get killed as a result of the use of them, not because they're on tanks or anything like that. It's the radioactive impact. So cancers, very prevalent, birth deformities, all the things you would expect from radiation poison, they come alongside depleted uranium. If you're trying to help the Ukrainian people, why do you send the weapons that are going to kill them and their families and have this toxic legacy for generations to come? So we saw recently the terrible tragedy, dam, there's all terrible flooding and what that's going to do, not having that reservoir there, for livestock, for crops, everything. So on so many levels, the wider implications. It's not just for food and stuff in Ukraine and the people there. We already know the impact of the war on populations in the global south because of food shortages and so on. So it's like, you name it, Shadia, it's a disaster. This war is a disaster. NATO is a disaster. It's small wonder that countries in the global south haven't been jumping on this kind of, let's be in the war bandwagon, or even let's have sanctions bandwagon. They say NATO is a disaster.
Great. We are seeing that some of the participants cannot hear the volume, but from our end, everything is fine. So maybe you can try to check your volumes from the device. I really hope that everybody can hear. But so we have heard some contribution from UK. We are again very thankful to Padraig and Shadia to have prepared this video from us, but we have one last contribution from England. I wonder if she's here. We are going to show also a small video of the Aldermaston Women's Peace Camp, but first it would be great if Isla can speak, maybe introduce a little bit their activity there. Yeah, you need to unmute. Okay, now maybe. Hi, Isla. We can't, no, I'm so sorry, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, great. Hi, I'm so happy that you joined us today. Oh, I think you need to unmute yourself again one last time.
Sorry about this.
No, that's great.
We're so pleased to be part of this global wave. We've been demonstrating outside Britain's bomb factories since the Greenham days. We started at Greenham Common and got rid of cruise missiles there, and now we're Aldermaston, and it's so important for us. We come here on a monthly basis because Britain is just having in cooperation with the Americans and NATO, and we feel that our presence here at Aldermaston Women's Peace Camp every month is just a little part of the protest that we can do against Britain's nuclear weapons. And we hope that we wish you all very best of luck. We are so proud to be part of your.
Thank you, Aisla. Yeah, the internet connection is sadly not that good, but that's what happened when you try to connect with people from all over the world. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. And we're sitting outside. We're in the Berkshire countryside in England, sitting outside the weapons factory. So probably it's not a good reception. No. But anyway, we're so happy to be here and to be part of your wave.
Yeah, thank you again. That's the whole idea of the Peace Wave. So we can bypass the internet problems and try to connect with you. And I'm very glad that you could join us here in person. And I think we can show now also the videos that you sent us. So maybe we can understand more what you're doing there.
Thank you. We are Aldermaston Women's Peace Camp. We grew out of the Green and Common Peace Camp, which got rid of cruise missiles. But we have been camping here monthly for the last 40 years because of Britain's nuclear weapons programme. We are here still because of the increase in nuclear weaponisation throughout the world.
We want accountability for British nuclear testing, justice for the Western Shoshone Nation and victims of all British nuclear colonialism.
Scrap Trident, implement all nuclear treaties, bring justice and assistance to the victims of all nuclear weapons tests and use. Sign the UN Nuke Ban Treaty. Sign the UN Nuclear Ban Treaty. Sign the UN Nuclear Ban Treaty now!
Great. Thank you again. And it's so nice to see all these activities. And thank you for what you're doing in England. And I think we are right on time, and we can move on now with another country. For the next 20 minutes, we are going to hear a contribution from Portugal. The first one is going to be José Manuel Pureza, and he will talk about the need of a great internationalist movement for peace that matches pacifism within self-determination and a radical political critique of the political and economic system that fuels war. The second contribution is from Andrea Galvao, a student and climate justice activist. The third one will be from Bruno Gois, a research and activist for social justice. And the last one will be a solidarity message from Hindi Mesle, a Palestinian that is living now in Lisbon. So I think we can start with the first contribution from Portugal. Perfect.
Hi, everyone. My name is José Manuel Pureza. I'm from Portugal. I teach international relations at the University of Coimbra, and I am a member of the Portuguese Left Bloc. And first of all, let me tell you that I am quite honored to be involved in this important initiative that intends to, the way I see it, it intends to raise awareness and call everyone to a dynamic of peace against all the narratives, all the discourses, all the political decisions that aim to obtain a sort of military solution to the war in Ukraine, which involves, of course, a nightmare of nuclear Armageddon. The peace movement has always been heterogeneous, but over time, one of its main components was a radical critique of the confinement of the political space and of the public debate by a construction of reality as enclosed in simplistic antagonisms, like the one between country A versus country B, as if country A and country B were not several different things, did not have many internal tensions and contradictions, in which there was no dispute over policies and power. The peace movement has always incorporated this demand to unfold what is presented by the dominant discourses as the actors that count in conflicts. States, presented as something opaque, presented as a sort of billiard balls, bringing to the fore policies, socioeconomic hierarchies, and all the violence that geopolitics hides behind its poor ontology, only states, and often only great powers. Those of us who match the combat for peace with all the combats for emancipation do not fight for peace because of cuteness, but because we don't accept that war may serve as a device to erase the centrality of the political struggle and of all emancipatory struggles, whatever their scale is. This is how I see Martin Luther King's pacifism as a superior level of the anti-racist struggle and for civil rights. And this is also the way I see Gandhi's pacifism as a superior stage of the anti-colonial struggle, which rejected not only formal colonialism, but the very models of reasoning and violent action of the oppressors, and disarmed their repressive strategy through nonviolent resistance. So it's because of emancipation that we fight for peace, and not because of a sort of moral imperative according to which any peace is always superior to any war. I don't believe that this is true. The wars of national liberation, the wars of resistance to oppression and occupation, and the wars against tyranny do not deserve our a priori refusal, rather our solidarity, precisely because they are instruments made necessary for the essential emancipation. As you all remind, in February 2003, the massive demonstrations all over the world, the massive demonstrations for peace against the war in Iraq, were demonstrations against imperialism and against the world political economy that drove the international political process towards that war. Our current challenge in these precise days that we are living in, at this extremely delicate moment, is precisely to rescue this sense of emancipation and radical criticism, not only of war, but of what leads to it, in a great internationalist movement for peace. Faced with the war in Ukraine, this general challenge should be divided, in my mind, in 5 concrete challenges. And I would like very briefly to go into each of these 5 concrete challenges that I believe we are facing at this very moment. The first, and perhaps the most important challenge, is to create a strong political and public voice for peace that opposes the voice for war that has taken hold in the public space. With this strong voice for peace, we should want no less than to break with the hegemony of speeches in favor of the military solution, which in fact are a complete irresponsibility because they call for destruction that drags destruction and are illusory in denying the nightmare they drag on. The second main challenge I can identify at this moment is to articulate the political solution for the war with the primacy of the principle of self-determination of all peoples. The world needs a political solution to the war in Ukraine and to any other war, but namely the war in Ukraine, so that the self-determination of that people and of all peoples in that territory is fulfilled. I believe that the invasion of Ukraine and the Russian aggression are the opposite of that. The third challenge is to join forces to demand an urgent political investment in the densification of the channels that remain, let's say, alive despite the war. The grain export channel, the prisoner exchange channel. These are examples of things that may be deepened in aiming at obtaining a broader level of political negotiation. The next challenge is that we need to remove the exclusive criticism of war from the field of humanitarian compassion. It is precisely in the name of the direct and indirect victims that the primacy of the political solution must be clearly pointed out as an element of a lasting and ambitious security architecture guided by the values of human security and also climate justice. And finally, the fifth challenge that I can identify is the following one. The great internationalist movement for peace will always have an intersectional nature, articulating agendas and struggles such as that of the feminist movement, which exposes the patriarchal nature of the international system based on warlike competition, and that of the movement for climate justice, which shows that this struggle is at the heart of all conflict prevention strategies in our time. I will stop here, just saying that a political and ideological radical critique of the discourses and practices that are fueling war by halting emancipation. This is why a strong movement for peace is so important. Let's go for it.
Hi, I am Bruno from Portugal. I believe that turning the page on war in human history is not just a wishful thinking. I believe it's a realistic objective that must guide the international policy of all countries. Solidarity with the peoples, for instance, of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine, Palestine, or any other country involved in the conflict is not an empty word. In Portugal and in Europe, it is our duty as activists to demand our governments to reject the arms race and to promote international political and economic relations that lead to peace among the people.
My name is Andrea Galvão. I'm from Bloco de Esquerda, Portugal, And I would like to first start by saluting your initiative. It's of most importance right now and at any moment to discuss peace and to try to grasp a world beyond war. I would also like to express my solidarity to all the people who are resisting violence, resisting war, and have been ripped of their right to live and their right to freedom. We know that we are living in a sensitive period where geopolitical tensions are arising. We are seeing the world reconfigurate in front of our eyes. And we're also seeing the dissemination of violence, the normalization of war, the rise of the extreme right, and a threat to our project of social justice and energetic transition, and all our projects for a world in which we can inhabit, in which we inhabit in a way that is fair and that is just. We know that that project depends on peace, depends on solidarity, depends on diplomatic agreements, and depends on international cooperation. But we know that when we are speaking about the unfairness of war and how it afflicts and attacks all kinds of rights, human rights, women's rights, nature's rights, refugees' rights, racialized people's rights, children's rights, all kinds of rights. We know that we need to demand a different international policy. We need to demand different policies from our governments in order to build social justice, in order to build peace, not just global peace, but peace at a social justice level. And I express my solidarity. And again, I would like to say thanks for your initiative.
First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me the space and the opportunity to speak. And maybe let me start by introducing myself. My name is Hindi Masleh. I'm a Palestinian, at the moment based in Lisbon, living in Lisbon, Portugal. I've been in Lisbon for the last 6 years. And in Palestine, I come from a village close to Ramallah, 20 kilometers to the south of Ramallah. The village is as well at the borders with Israel, exactly at the Green Line. The fact that the village is at the Green Line and it's a border with Israel makes it a very sensitive area that has been facing lots of Israeli practices, as it has always been, land theft, invasions, checkpoints. The villages are completely surrounded by settlements, and as well at the moment the village is completely surrounded by the Israeli apartheid wall. I grew up in a village where activism was very strong. I continued being active until I left Palestine in 2013. And in Palestine, as I studied documentary film production and photography, I have always been present in those protests, and as well, if not in attending and documenting, but as well in organizing, not only in the village, but as well in the surrounding villages, such as Budrus and Bil'ain village, that they are very well known for their weekly protest against the apartheid wall. And moving to Lisbon, the fact that the Palestinian community is a very small community, faced a little bit of certain difficulties. To work within the community will give you strength and more ideas and power to start doing things related to Palestine. But that doesn't stop this from happening. As in Portugal, we have lots of support and help from the Portuguese, whether individuals or groups or political parties, as the leftist political parties in Portugal have always been present, and one of the parties not only fighting for Palestine but as well for lots of Portuguese topics, housing, anti-racism, lots of social topics as well. The fact that I am Palestinian makes me always focus at the Palestinian topic and the Palestinian cause. Not because I'm Palestinian, definitely that's one reason, but as well from a human point of view, from the human side, feel always there's a huge injustice in Palestine, a very brutal occupation that has been going on for the last more than 70 years, and unfortunately it hasn't stopped, and we don't see a very near future solution. It's actually in the contrary. I went to Palestine a couple of months ago, and the escalation, the extremism, the occupation, the Israeli illegal settlements, colonial settlements, is everywhere. The wall is everywhere, and unfortunately, this is related to has lots of reasons. First of all, Israel is not held accountable for its crimes, massacres. In Palestine, daily human rights violations, checkpoints everywhere, house demolition, arresting, killing, humiliating Palestinians at checkpoints, and every single day. And as Israel is not held accountable, and there is a huge impunity for Israel, it continues, and unfortunately it will continue the human rights violations against the Palestinians. And as well, Israel has have moved from not only an occupation, but as well into a weapons industry state. In the last few months, we've seen Israeli companies and Israeli military promoting its weapons and weapon industry as field tested on Palestinians, in Palestinian cities, villages, refugee camps, not only in Gaza, but as well now in the West Bank. In my village, when I was there, our neighbor's house got destroyed, and we could notice that Israel films every single operation, every single house demolition, explosives, airstrikes, tanks and vehicles, military vehicles, certain weapons. It films it while it is invading the Palestinian houses to promote it as field tested for their weapon industry. I keep always being into the Palestinian topic. We're here organizing. Recently, we will start soon we will start more into raising awareness, promoting certain Palestinian topics. Not only protest, where I think it's very important, but as well we need to give people the power of the knowledge, of the information as well. As an individual, and soon as a community, as we are forming a Palestinian group or a Palestinian community, we have been always as individual in support of certain local struggles. As I said, the housing issue, the anti-racist support into the anti-racism, the Black Lives Matter, and a lot of other Portuguese internal issue, because the freedom, we will not be free until everyone free. We as a community have been very presented in the Pride in Portugal, in the LGBT activities and so on. And I believe that we will never be free. No one will be free until we are all free. Again, thank you so much for having me and giving me the space to speak.
Yeah, great. It was so great to hear these testimonies, and I think it just shows how much we are all interconnected in this world, and it's just a reminder also. It goes on the same line as the Peace Wave to say that, yeah, we are all here together in this, and we are all connected. And it was very, very inspiring to hear these voices. And I think we are on time now. We can move on to the next session, and we are going to hear from the West Africa countries. They have prepared a panel. I'm going to give the floor in a minute to Rashid Youssef from the Raha Foundation. And I just want to thank before again Rashid and Ernest Gibson, because they were the regional coordinator for this support. So thank you again for all your work here. And yeah, I don't want to steal much time from you, so I'm giving you the floor. Thanks, Rashid.
All right, thanks, Mitchell. Hi, everyone. It's good afternoon here, and then good day to everybody from all around the world. My name is Rashid Yusuf, and I'll be moderating the session for the for West Africa today. And with me, I have Ernest Gibson as my co-moderator. Ernest Gibson, please can you say hello to everyone so they can see you?
Hello, everyone. It's unfortunate I'm in Brussels right now at another program. Yeah, and I'm having a little bit of interruption here, so I will be supporting Rashid behind the scenes. So thank you, and I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you. So for Africa session, we have some speakers lined up for the discussion around peace and not to militarization and just cooperation, how we can foster peace in Africa. And with me today, I have speakers from different backgrounds around peace and development from West Africa and South Africa. So I have with me Dr. Akin Lijoka. Dr. Akin Lijoka is a lecturer and an international and political science. He's from Ahmadu Bello University, and he'll be leading the conversation today. With me, we also have Richard Appiah from Ghana. We have Tyson Smith from Liberia. We have Cyril Bacon from Cameroon. And we also have Memani from South Africa. So we're glad and we're happy to have everybody here. So I will just got right into the conversation. I'll be starting with Dr. Akin Lijoka. So Dr. Akin Lijoka, are you there? You can unmute yourself. All right, great. Okay, so quick one. Can you give us a brief, tell us about the situation in Africa, the concerns we have? Can you hear me clearly? Dr. Akin, we can't hear you. It's not clear. We can't hear you.
Yeah, can you maybe try to change your headphone setting in the Zoom? Maybe that's why we can't hear you.
Okay, you can unplug the headphone and let's speak there. We still can. Okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Can you? Yeah, it's getting better. So.
Somebody is talking.
Okay, go ahead. I think it's clear now. We got you. So please go on.
Okay. Africa has been the continent having different challenges. And of course, the challenges cannot really be divorced from its history of colonial rule and of course the history of military rule. Of them, or the majority of them are the military rule. So building Africa has been the major problem in Africa. When the colonial masters were living, they handed down Africa where they were not to having steady economic efforts. And of course, they were not raised in terms of technological know-how to develop Africa. So this is the background to which we found ourselves today in Africa. So when the colonial masters left, the people that inherited Africa from them were able to manage the resources at their disposal at that point. And of course, the military came in and they battered the whole economies of Africa. And this is what we've been facing today. Even with the renaissance of democratic rule right from the 1980s and of course to the present day we are, there have been issues of fostering peace. And one of the challenges in fostering peace in Africa is the issue of ethnicity. Leaders are full of themselves whenever they are in power, and we want to at all time raise their ethnic groups high than the other groups. And then we have problems. Then we have crisis. So this is one of the issues we've been having. I remember the other one, the state itself. So African leaders are more emotionally attached to their primordial sentiments. And given that scenario, the state is seen as an alien contraption in which you just get there, whatever you can get in terms of siphoning the resources there, you just do it and then move away from it. And then you install your own stooges to remain in power, if at all you can remain there. So sit-tight syndrome now has been a major issue in many of the African countries. So to foster peace, then we don't have problems. You understand? So ethnicity is one. And number two is corruption. Corruption is a monstrous phenomenon that has permeated the faces of our lives in Africa. Not only in Africa, even in the developed societies. But the problem is that it is more precarious in Africa, given our delicate economic situation. So, fostering peace, you just have to battle with poverty. Poverty is one of the challenges we are having in Africa. Poverty is the state of being poor, as Walter Rodney would say. One of my professors says poverty is the denial of citizens' right to social wealth. It is a problem in Africa. One of the challenges we'll be having is this poverty of it. So how can we really make the people of Africa be free from poverty? Democracy cannot thrive well in a society where people are too poor. That's a fact. So for us to have thoroughgoing democracy in Africa, we need to eradicate poverty. It is one of the goals of sustainable development. But what have we really done towards promoting peace in Africa? In Africa, where poverty can be seen, or we should be seen, or it should be seen as something of the past. If poverty is still there, then there can be peace in Africa. So what we should focus on is how best to eradicate poverty. And we can eradicate poverty in Africa through good governance. Good governance is key to eradicating poverty. If you can't do that, so you can't promote peace. There can't be peace in Africa. People are too poor here in this part of the world. They barely feed themselves, their families. And of course, those who now appropriate powers want to remain there or put their students or even their children there so that they continue to siphon the economies of Africa. And of course, we have comprador bourgeoisie in Africa, those who live with the bourgeoisie in the Western world to make Africa. We still have them in place. So until we uproot them,
I think we lost them. Yeah.
I hope you got the message.
Okay,
So
it's back.
We have in Africa other things as terrorism, which is equally from poverty that we'll be talking about. Poverty serves as a fertile ground for terrorism. So people resort to extremism to hear their anger over their being alienated from their respective societies in Africa. The clan-driven conflicts in Somalia is as a result of poverty. And of course, the issue of Boko Haram in West Africa is as a result of poverty. So, and that's why we said poverty eradication is key to promoting peace in Africa. And that we have argued we should promote good governance. We should fight corruption. And then the issue of terrorism, we gradually leave Africa. Economy, we really need to raise the economies of Africa. Just November last year, for example, in Nigeria, the National Bureau of Statistics says 133 million Nigerians live in multidimensional poverty. It means that more than 60% Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And you remember Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa. And where you have more than 60% of them living below poverty line, it means that there is a big problem in Africa. So there is a need to promote good governance for us to foster peace in Africa. Again, the issue of state repression must be there. Must be eradicated in Africa. Repressing decent voices, those who raise their voices criticizing governments in Africa, are being suppressed. And this
I think we lost him again. So I think we lost him.
Agenda. Every government has an agenda. And government is by no means malevolent. Every government is expected to be benevolent. So government of benevolence, working towards eradicating poverty, and of course, promoting healthcare delivery, accessible and affordable healthcare services, so that our leaders will not be running to the Western or Asian worlds to get Medicare. So we really need to work on this. And of course, there is a need to promote education. Education is key to sustainable development. If you want to sustain any development at all, you need to prioritize education. But how are we doing that in Africa? It's been an issue to foster, to emancipate the people of Africa. And you do that through education. This is the thought of Sidney Weber and Hammond Gabriel in their work, The Civic Culture, when they were saying that if the developing nations really want to bridge the gap between them and the developed worlds, they really need to work on their level of education. You prioritize education, let the people get aware, let them go to schools, let them learn trades. You remember what Lee Kuan Yew did when he wanted to change the fortunes of Singapore. Just within 10 years, Singapore became one of the successful economies in the world. You know, Singapore got independence in 1965 from the Federation of Malaysia. So within 10 years, in 1975, it became a China store, a society where investors ran to invest. So we can make Africa work on this. And what did Lee Kuan Yew did to prioritize education and empowerment? He established skill acquisition centers and made everything work for the youth. He zeroed in their youth. We can do that in Africa. If you want to promote peace, you don't allow our youths to roam the streets doing nothing. In Somalia, in Cameroon, in Guinea, several other countries, you see youths roaming the streets, doing nothing.
All right. Sarah, we might bring you up because we're losing. Okay, Tyson, are you there? I'll bring you up and so that we can continue from where the logical internet is fluctuating there. Dr. Akin, we lost you. We lost you, and then your mic is on. I don't know if it's on mute. We can't hear you clearly anymore. We still can't hear you. You can check your mic. So, but we'll come back to you. Give us a few minutes, and let's bring Tyson in, and then have him answer some of our questions.
Can you hear
Tyson,
me now?
are you there? Yes, we can. Okay.
Okay, can I?
Okay, go on.
Okay.
Yeah. We lost you again. We can't hear you clearly. Okay, you know what? We will come back to you. Let's bring on Tyson from to join in and then give us his takes, and then we'll come back to you. So Tyson, welcome. Tyson, I can't hear you. Can you hear? Can you unmute yourself? Tyson, please, if you can hear me, please let me know if you can hear me because I can't hear you. Okay. Tyson, welcome. So I have a few questions for you, about 2 questions, and I would like to ask you. I know we in Africa we've been trying to take some steps into achieving successful peace building from Western Africa, from Eastern Africa, within countries and within countries, intra and inter-conflict. So what are some successful examples of peace building in Africa that we've tried so far? And what are the challenges of achieving those successes? And what are the profound successes that you have identified or Africa identified in peace building? Tyson, you have the floor.
Good afternoon to all. I'm Tyson Smith Berigino, Executive Director of Focus International and member of the African Working Group of the International Peace Bureau, also a council member of the International Peace Bureau. Today, I'll be representing the International Peace Bureau through the African Working Group contribution on the 24-hour peace wave. Today, as we all know, the challenges we face in Africa as it relates to the growth and development of Africa, peace. But I'll be specific in the Liberian context. I'll be specific in the Liberian context.
I'm so sorry, Tyson, to interrupt. Can you try to speak a little bit closer to the mic so we can hear you better? Can you try to stay closer to the phone? Yeah.
I'm not even getting you guys because you guys are very, very low. I'm just trying to get you guys. Yeah.
Yes.
We can hear you now. Please go ahead. Come closer to your mic and continue the way it is. You don't have to go so far. Just hold it and go on. Yeah.
As I stated that I will be specific on Liberian context, where Liberia got its independence in 1847 when the free slaves migrated from the US
Tyson, please, can you take the phone closer to you? Do not take it far from you. You can hold the phone in front of your face and continue. Please do not take it farther from you. You are far from the phone. Yeah, you can just hold it closer to you and then go ahead. Yeah, this is fine, and then go on.
Okay, are you getting me now?
Perfect. Go on.
Okay. As I was saying that I will be specific on the Liberian context from our perspective of the peace wave. Liberia got its independence in 1847 when the first free slaves migrated from the United States of America and settled on the Providence Island in 1822. And Liberia has faced a civil war which was one of Africa's bloodiest from 1989 to 2005. And this war claimed the lives of more than 200,000 Liberians and further displaced millions of others into refugee camps in neighboring countries. To be specific, Ivory Coast, Guinea, and that of Ghana, which we have the Bujumbura camp. And people who fought this war was most often child soldiers, were used through all the war. Liberia cherished the past 80 years of peace. However, this peak in turn of sadness of them restore measure of confidence in the institution of peace, democratic election, which restore measure. Government have provided that difference can be resolved through peace, political competition at government, and provide difference. If Liberian repeat this source in 2023, it will mark the second democratic transfer of power from the elected incumbent President George M. Weah to elected executive since 1944, as former President Eddie Johnson stepped down during the first democratic transfer of power at the end of her constitutional mandate. Vertical social cohesion is also strained by capitalism, rent-seeking, and weak civil society. These are problems that we face in our society today, where in civil society that 65% of our population is high in Africa, and the country remains impoverished and in desperate need of livelihood, education, and that of job. Fear of compound since the United Nations mission in Liberia, withdrawal of troops from Liberia and the government of Liberia taking over its own security. The main guarantor of statewide security since the end of the war in some, although Liberia has emerged from the dark days of civil war and taking significant steps towards democratic governance, positive peace have yet to take root through all the country. National security remains fragile, honor resource, and citizens live with the fear that violent conflict could reawaken locally and spread. So with this contribution of the problem we face within Africa and Liberia as a case study, as a general perspective in Africa, we see that agricultural development, food security has been one of the problems faced with Africa. Two, have the situation of violent crime, and which include domestic violence, which have taken over Africa society, making Africa to go backward. We have
the issue of environmental sustainability and climate change. When you visit some slum community in Africa, you observe that the environment is not safe for life of our citizens. So these are things that is caused by citizens that live within our environment. Here we have the issue of equal opportunity for all. There is a tendency in Africa that we observe that when it is not you, it is not good. When it is not you, others cannot benefit. This is the tendency we have in Africa. You, me, and myself. So in this light, we also look at things from different perspectives when it comes to equal opportunity. We don't, improve others when it comes to equal opportunity. When it comes to social, religious background, these are things that cause war in Liberia. Yeah, that make war to escalate in Liberia. On this note, I will stop here because I've taking my 5 minutes. So I will stop here and give.
All right. Thank you, Tyson, and for highlighting the major challenges that we have in Liberia. And you are also highlighted most of the challenges on what's transpired from Liberia context and how we can actually improve by the government taking efforts and the likes. But thank you so much, Tyson. But now we'll go to Advocate Yvonne Mimami. Advocate Yvonne Mimami is from South Africa, and she's a barrister. Please, are you there? Can you come up, Advocate Yvonne Mimami? Thank you for joining in. So, Dr. Akin and Tyson both shared the challenges that we have in Africa as regards achieving peace and ways that we can, the challenge of the government, the civil society organizations, the people, the resources, and the history of why this has been a challenge in Africa. But coming to you as someone that has been in the space in South Africa, what do you think, or what are the concrete actions that can be taken to achieve these challenges? That's one. And what are the opportunities for cooperation between stakeholders in fostering peace in Africa? Can you shed more light on these possible solutions? What do we need to do? What are the action plans? And how can we cooperate and collaborate to achieve peace in Africa?
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me into this space. And then may I just switch off my camera, because I always have a problem with the camera and the audio at the same time. Yeah? I will respond to your questions. Thanks. What I think can be done in order to resolve the problem in Africa is to involve Africa itself, because the UN has tried to come up with many peace forces for so many years. For example, in 1961 in the DRC, there was a complex situation where there were influx of mercenaries from multinational mining companies, and there was war, and the war was not resolved. And then I am saying, because the AU has set up a peacekeeping structure, and then that peacekeeping structure of the African unity, it will have to have teeth so that it can bite. Because the war in Africa, it's not only the war, the physical war, the poverty that was raised by the doctor earlier on. And as a result, because of that poverty, you find Africans throughout the world trying to seek and also sell their cheap labor in other countries. And where in some instances you find that they are being discriminated against. And the problem also, we need to check, the problem in Africa is because Africa is rich in minerals. So there are many people who are benefiting out of all these wars in Africa. So the reason why I am saying, I think if we can just leave Africa on its own to try and resolve the problems. Yes, of course, there are ethnic problems within Africa. There are a number of like poverty and the other things that are in Africa. But I think if Africa can be given an opportunity to can deal with its own problems, possibly there can be, peace in Africa. Because, I mean, there has been violence, there have been wars in Africa since, and it is not even in the media most of the time. So I'm not sure whether you want me to still continue to talk or
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, you still have some few moments. Please go on.
Yes. So yeah. So my key point is that because at the end of the day, who is suffering out of these wars? It's women and children, and civilians are the ones who are the victims of this whole thing. They are the victims of this whole thing. And then there are businesses, multinational businesses that are operating in different countries in Africa, where you find that there's a business that is booming on the sideline of the country, and then whilst there's a civil war in the same instance. So these are crises, and perhaps maybe, Africa cannot ban multinational companies to come and do business in Africa, but those businesses must be done in a proper way. It must be done, the businesses must be done in a way that promotes peace within the continent. So thanks, sir.
All right. Thank you, Barrister Yvonne. And when you all shared these concerns and from the poverty in the spectrum of this conversation of fostering peace in Africa, talk about the challenges of poverty and the democracy not being straightforward, and we not having the structure of managing peace by ourselves or fostering democracy in Africa. But it brings me to the question of militarization in Africa. As you've mentioned, where we have challenges of multinational corporations, the resources creating a lot of havoc in Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, in northwest of Nigeria, and the likes. But it called for militarization, but at the same time, we see a pattern of spending more on militarization than spending on development, spending on the growth of the people, which could actually solve the challenges of the poverty, right? So in what way, Dr. Akin, I will give the floor to you to answer this. What are the ways that we can channel and change the narrative from spending money unnecessarily on weapons and looking forward to militarize the country or the nation or the continent, instead of channeling those funds to development in Africa? What can you say about that? And what are the opportunities that would actually bring if you are shifting the narrative from militarization to investing in education, healthcare, and the action that would actually move Africa forward? Dr. Akin, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Very clear, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I mentioned poverty. We really need to look into that. And the best thing we can do in Africa is provide affordable and qualitative education for our youth. And of course, those of them that we want to involve in skill acquisition, let government step forward to train them and then provide some sort of assistance to them to be on their own. Having done that, there is a need for government to involve in critical infrastructure, to build schools, to construct roads, race system, interconnect Africa, so that people can move from one location to the other. I mentioned infrastructure, electricity. How are we enjoying stable power supply in Africa? If we really want to make things work, if you really want to reflect the comatose economic situation of Africa, we really need to work on infrastructure, energy infrastructure. We really need to move towards green moving towards solar generating infrastructure, solar generating electricity. We should move away from greenhouse emissions. Of course, we know that these things are causing climate change. So we really need to move towards other things that we can generate electricity from. We really need to promote again inclusivity in governance. People feel alienated in most cases. If you read the work of Frank Fanon, René Zahar, they talked about human alienation. So the argument is that when people are being alienated from the society they are more likely to be aggressive. And that's the position of things, particularly in many parts of Africa, and Nigeria inclusive. When people feel alienated, then they take to the streets, they take to crimes. So there is a need to promote inclusivity in governance. And when you do that, people then can be abreast that this is our government. You remember when protesters were in the White House in 1861, protesting to the government that soldiers were being killed in the American Civil War. What did the president then tell them? He said, these guys that were killed in the American Civil War knew that the government meant themselves, that they would feel that this is their government, not just a government of the people in the White House alone. And we used those shooting words to placate those people. So there is a need to promote inclusive government in Africa. And again, about this issue of poverty, there is a need to mechanize farming. Many of our youths now do not want to go into farming. One, it is not lucrative for them. And of course, two, it is not mechanized. There is a need to look into this, to mechanize farming and, to encourage the youth, give some sort of incentives to youth to go into farming, and you mechanize it for them. Like I said, they must not be idle. If you want to foster peace in Africa, youth must not be idle. If they are idle, there can't be peace in Africa. So there is a need to work towards that. Mechanize farming, fight corruption, eradicate poverty, and promote good governance. Yes, democracy is adjudged to be the best form of government today because it promotes inclusivity, it promotes representation, and it promotes participation. So how do we make that have a smooth sail? By incorporating the people. And again, elections must not be rigged in Africa. If you rig elections, some people will feel alienated. They may not want to be in alliance with the government in power. And of course, there's a need to fight sit-tight syndrome in Africa. Some leaders will want to remain in power for life. Some may even want to install their wives or their children after leaving or while preparing to leave. We must work against this. I know that AU has been working on this, and of course the regional organizations in Africa like SADC in Southern Africa, and of course ECOWAS and the rest of them, they'll be working towards this directive. So there's a need to look into this. I have mentioned education. We need to fight corruption because corruption is an antisocial behavior. As Professor Osoba will say, conferring a proper benefit contrary to moral and legal norms, and which undermines the authority to improve on the living condition of the people. We really need to fight corruption in Africa. Those who are found to have to have enriched themselves in using corruption should be jailed. There's a need to look into this. They should be jailed. They should be found, once they are found guilty, they should be jailed. All their properties that they have illegally accumulated should be confiscated from them. Because in Africa, we have leaders who are full of primitive accumulation. So we really need to fight this in Africa. And of course, youth must be abreast to democratic governance, must be ready to work
Okay, Dr. Akin, we lost you there. So, Richard Apia is from Ghana. He's going to come up next, and Richard, please, can you come up? Richard, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Welcome, Richard. So,
Thank you.
Richard, I wanted to have a take on this. Talk about demilitarization and its effects in Africa. And if you look at the situation happening in Sudan at the moment, which started from bringing in some form of militarization that is not even the government, it is not the nation's government, and bringing in Janjaweed and joining them into militarization, and then bringing up all these things and making a case for power tussle. Please just shed more light on militarization in Africa and the effects and how we can actually shift that narrative to something that can be better than spending much more on money, but fostering peace in a more sustainable way.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. I hope everyone can hear me very loud and clear.
Loud and clear, Richard.
Okay, great. Like I was saying quite earlier in my text, I think it was just an add-up to what Doctor was saying. Militarization basically is the processes through which the military is empowered and are given much more higher gains over the civilian authority. And so, in my opinion, I think that in Africa, most of our political leaders tend to understand or tend to admit that once they empower the military, they have some sort of backing, they have some sort of support. And so the moment they begin to do their illegal claims, they begin to do what is not right legitimately, they tend to empower the military so that they have some sort of backing from the military to be able to do all sorts of menial stuff. Now, here is how to go about it. When we don't curb militarization as a continent, it would go a long way to bring about war. The reason is this. The moment people get to understand that the military is in tune with the government, it brings some sort of chaos, it brings some sort of anarchy. Now, another problem is the moment the youth don't understand what the government is doing, the youth is always ready to have some sort of leverage on the military or on the judicial system. And so if the youths find out that the military is in some sort of support with, or is in some sort of bed with the government or the political powers that be, that's also going to create some sort of political problem or anarchy or let's say war. Going forward, to curb this problem, all we need to do is thorough education. We need to understand that every arm of government has its own every arm of government has its own duty to perform. And so we shouldn't, or we should in no case make one arm of government more superior over the other. The youth need to understand that, or even the people within the space need to understand that anytime that we do this is what we bring on ourselves as Africans. And so this is the main thing that we need to do is education, thorough education. Another thing that has to do is unemployment. Most of the youth are into the military purposes because of unemployment. The reason is they understand that it is some sort of leverage to gain some sort of money, because once you are in the military, you are empowered by the political powers, and then whatever that the political people tell you, you are able to go by. If we are able to curb unemployment issues, everybody has some leverage with whatever they want to do within the system. Issues of militarization would go down, because we would have true people who are willing to serve in the military true and true, devoid of political powers, devoid of monetarization, devoid of any sort of ethnicity or tribalism. This is my take. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that insightful that insight into why this is actually thriving in Africa. But Dr. Akin, I'm not sure if you are back on. If you are, I would like you to complete what you were saying, give recommendations, and then Dr. Barrister Yvonne, I'll come back to you next.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, please let me complete what I was trying to say. You know, we are looking at militarization in Africa. And I've given the background to that poverty is the major cause of militarization. So if we really want to fight it in Africa, there is a need for us, one, to fight poverty. And of course, our porous borders in Africa, where light weapons are being moved around. There is a need to tighten our borders, even though we have some protocols encouraging people to move from one country to another. There is a need to work on that. And of course, there's a need to fasten our security agencies to be able to man our borders and then fight illicit crimes. These things are very important. And there's a need to equip these military personnel, to equip them, and of course, for them to move towards getting some sophisticated gadgets to track down criminals around us, those who go with AK-47 and the rest of them. There should be some sort of sophisticated technological gadgets to track those people, arrest them, and then, if possible, jail them, or we turn them to other things. For example, by giving them amnesty and then for them to start a new life, if possible. But the important thing is we should fasten our borders, equip our security personnel to be able to track down criminals around us in Africa. And of course, there is a need to improve the security situation of Africa. If we are able to do this, we educate our youth that there is a need for them to involve in legitimate businesses, and then that there is a need for them. And again, if they feel that they are secured where they are and they can have some jobs to do around them, many of them may not get militarized. So if we want to demilitarize Africa, we really need to look into poverty, to fight poverty. And of course, there's a need to improve governance, because there is a crisis of governance in Africa. The winner takes all, what we call in political science, zero-sum game. Once you win an election, you take it all. No, if we continue like that, we will continue to have problems in Africa. So if we want to demilitarize Africa, we really need to work on this. We really need to promote good governance. Let our people see and enjoy the dividends of democracy around where they are. Don't let our people feel alienated in Africa. When you make our people feel alienated, they are likely going to equip themselves illegally and become something else in Africa. So there is a need to look into this, promote good governance, fight corruption, equip our security personnel to be able to man our borders. And of course, youths, we should not allow them to remain idle. We really need to look for something for them to do. Education, empowerment. And then women and children, we really need to look into that. Gender equality. In fact, it is one of the goals of the sustainable development. How do we promote gender equality? Women in Africa are being discriminated against in many quarters. What can we do? How many of them have been able to become presidents in Africa? How many of them have been able to become governors? They are the most vulnerable, women and children. What can we do to raise them, to make them more inclusive in governance? You remember I talked about inclusivity in governance. There's a need to look into that. When you fight corruption, and of course, there is a need to fasten our institutions, to make our institutions resource-driven, various institutions of a state, for us to be able to fasten them to be more resource-oriented, more inclusive, not predatory. If they are predatory, they are not likely to get the best out of out of our people in Africa. Demilitarizing Africa comes from fighting poverty. Do not make the youths of Africa idle. And then government should promote good governance by fighting corruption, improving infrastructure. You understand? Make education accessible and affordable. And of course, promoting affordable healthcare services. If we're able to do all of these things, we are good to go in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Akin. That was very insightful. So, Barrister Yvonne, please, you can join in and give us a recommendation as the cases in South Africa and your works across Africa.
Actually, I'm not going to give cases in South Africa because at least in South Africa, there are challenges, but as much as there are challenges, but at least South Africa is doing much better. And then the crisis that South Africa is having is an overpopulation. And then the overpopulation that is as a result of people who are moving from other African countries going straight to Africa with the purpose of getting quality jobs and etc. But my proposal here is that these multilateral corporations, they need to plow back in Africa in the form of a true government so that we can improve the education, the quality of education in Africa, so that we are able also to eradicate poverty and also that plowing back can also improve or infrastructure development in Africa. And then the other, so that they can be able to do that in Africa. And then those are the things that needs to be the solutions. These are the things that I think needs to be the solutions in African problems. Thank you. I'm not going to talk about militarization because the gentlemen have spoken a lot. I'm just filling the gap where I think needs to happen. These multilateral corporations, they really need to play their role. They cannot just come and then and get resources and then not create jobs, quality jobs, and then thereafter they leave Africa in the state it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Tyson, are you on? Can we hear you clearly? Okay.
Yeah.
Please, in a minute or two, can you give recommendation and yes, yeah. Okay. Tyson, okay.
Yeah, I'm getting you now. I'm getting you clear.
Okay, please, in a minute or two, can you give a recommendation on what we can do from your own experience, from what you've seen so far, and then how we can move forward?
Yeah, based on current phase in Africa, I would like to recommend that we promote transparency, stewardship, and accountability in public resources management by supporting and initiating the increase of transparency and accountability in public resource management. And secondly, one of the things I would like to recommend is that we increase trust and cooperation between government and citizen by advocating for greater transparency in public formulation and implementation, and by facilitating community encounters while decision-making is taking process. So with the two, I would like to stop here, not to carry much of your time, so that we can look at these two recommendations so that Africa can move forward.
Thank you, Tyson. I will look forward to that tool so that every member of the African Working Group and the Global World can have access to that, and then we can make action plans with that. So, Richie, I'm going to give you a minute to give your recommendations.
Yeah, quick one. I think that moving forward, we need to have some sort of consensus building within the West African and South African states. Most of our leaders have no idea what all of these implementations are about. Most of our leaders are in there because of their selfish gains. we need to have some sort of consensus building, some sort of educational regimes or educational meetings with some of our leaders and explain to them that these are some of the measures that we have. These are some of the measures we need to put in place if we want to maintain the peace and stability in Africa. Then these are some of the things that need to be instituted so that we can curb some of the pending wars and all of those things that needs to be that can rise up from the petty things that our leaders are not doing right. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Richie. And then thanks to everyone for joining the African session of the Peace Wave. And I hope you all got the message from the African session, enjoyed the session. And I think furthering from that, I would encourage that the African team members, those that have spoken and those that are present, come together as recommended for a consensus, have an agreement for collaborations to promote peace with the peace wave, so that we can have actual action plans that can start giving results in Africa. And I just want to thank everybody once again. Thank you so much for having us. And I'll hand it over to Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rashid, again, and for this very insightful contribution. It was a pleasure to hear from you all, and I'm so happy that people are also using the chat. So keep doing that. It's amazing also to see your comments there. And now we are very on point. I'm very happy about that. We can conclude this session, and then we are going to stop for a second, and then we can start the second part of the Peace Wave. So keep online and see you in a